Welcome to NarrativeNook audio tales where enchanted stories come to life. If you enjoy our stories, please subscribe, like and share to support our channel. Enjoy listening.
Don't complicate matters, Dad. We just started dating. Josephine was worried that her father and grandfather would force Ethan to be responsible for her the first time they met him. Okay. Let's meet tonight. I'll check with him first and find out if he's free. Then, she ended the call with her father and dialed Ethan's number. Hello. Ethan answered in his deep voice. My dad is back and we're going to my grandfather's place for dinner as a family. I would like to invite you. If you're free, that is? Sure thing. I'm free, Ethan replied with a smile. Of course, it's not a problem as well if you don't want to go. We're just having a meal together, that's all. Josephine didn't want to push him into coming either. However, he felt that there was a need to meet her family, so he stated, It's about time that I visit your family. Okay. We'll meet after work, then, she said and started feeling nervous after hanging up. Will Grandpa and Dad be happy with me and Ethan? Especially Grandpa, who is a stubborn and conservative person. It will be bad if he starts to pick on Ethan. At that moment, a voice coming from behind the pillar next to her broke her chain of thoughts. Have you heard? Miss Alford is going to be one of the interviewers this time. Someone told me that she's very strict. Yes, I just heard about this. With her on the panel, who will ace this interview? She'll definitely create all sorts of difficult situations. Josephine's heart skipped a beat. Known for her arrogance in the company, Tori Alford was not a friendly or approachable person. Josephine was about to get a headache just from worrying about that. Right before she knocked off from work, her phone started ringing. Grabbing her phone, she saw that it was an unknown number. However, she picked up the call. Hello, who is this? Hi, is this Miss Jacobson? The male caller with a hoarse voice asked. Yes, it's me. May I ask who is on the line? It's me. Did you forget me because you're too busy? I'm the vice president of Vital Corporation, the man who asked for your number today. Oh, I remember now. Hello, sir. When are you free for an interview? Josephine asked anxiously. I'll be away on a business trip for the next 3 days. We can schedule a time once I'm back. Great. Let's pick a time for the interview once you're back, then. Sure, Miss Jacobson. It was rather obvious that the man on the other end of the line still didn't want to hang up, but Josephine was in a rush to get off work. And so, she said, I'm sorry, but I'm about to get off work. We'll schedule a time later. Goodbye. After she hung up, she hurried to the elevators and accidentally bumped into a person when she turned a corner. Ow. Coincidentally, the person she walked right into was Katrina, who had a bad day because of Ethan. She pulled a long face at the sight of Josephine. You're doing this on purpose, aren't you, Josephine? I'm sorry. It was an accident, Josephine apologized. I don't think so. You just look down on everyone because Mr. Quarles has your back now. Katrina yelled in anger. Feeling rather speechless, Josephine reckoned that there was nothing she could do if Katrina wanted to put it that way. Instead, she rushed to the elevators, leaving Katrina behind to stomp her feet furiously. Don't be so smug now, Jacobson. Let's wait and see how you end up later. The second Josephine left the building, she saw Ethan waiting for her in the sports car. Pulling the door open, she then climbed in and heard him say with a smile, Thanks for the hard work. I don't think it's hard, working for you, she said mischievously. Would you like to take the position of the lady boss right away and stop working for me? He asked, planning to promote her status. Josephine couldn't stop herself from giggling. Okay, let me think about it, she said with anticipation. Reaching out, Ethan ran his fingers through her hair. Although it had only been a few hours since he last saw her, he felt that he had missed out on so much already. "Let's go. My parents are waiting for us at home," Josephine murmured. While driving, Ethan commented, "I sent someone to buy some gifts, but I don't know what your grandfather likes. I just picked out a few things." "So, what did you pick?" "Some wine and supplements." "That's great. Grandpa likes having a drink before dinner," Josephine said in approval and reckoned that Ethan had a good eye for gifts. At Josephine's home, Heidi was a little surprised that Josephine hadn't mentioned that she had a boyfriend before this. "That girl told me that she was working with a colleague for the past few days." "Was she dating in secret?" she said, amused and helpless, realizing that her little girl was a grown-up now. "You're too protective of her. She's already 25 years old. It's about time she moves out to live by herself," Mills said to his wife. Regarding this, he was more open-minded compared to her. Could her boyfriend be Luke Clark? "I think that boy is quite good. He was very friendly during the wedding." "Sounds good. At the very least, Dad approves of the boys from the Clark family." Even Mills agreed that it wouldn't be bad if their son-in-law was Luke. Just then, Josephine came in through the door connecting to the garden. Worried that Ethan would feel awkward, she turned around and hooked her arm through his as they entered. In the living room, Mills and Heidi heard their footsteps and came out to take a look. When Heidi saw Ethan, her jaw dropped because the man was the last person she was expecting to see. Is he the guy Josephine has been dating recently? As the best man of the Presgraves' wedding and a friend of Elliot, he must be a member of the gentry. While she was still in shock, Ethan greeted them. "Nice to meet you, Mr. and Mrs. Jacobson. I'm Ethan Quarles, Joey's boyfriend." Mills wasn't expecting that Josephine's boyfriend would be such a tall, dashing man with a sophisticated air about him. However, Heidi already answered warmly. "Welcome. Come on in. It's Ethan, right? I remember you from the wedding." Then, she turned to Mills and explained, he was the best man during young Master Elliot's wedding. Hearing that Ethan was a close friend of the Presgraves, Mills reckoned that his personality and status would be better and higher than your average Joe. "Dad, are you wearing the suit that Mom bought? You look very handsome." Smiling brightly, Josephine grabbed Mills' arm and added, "I was the one who picked it out. It makes you look younger, doesn't it?" Mills really liked this suit, and it turned out that his daughter was the one who chose it for him. "What business is your family running?" For his daughter's sake, he had to start questioning Ethan about his family background. "My family is in the shipping business. I'm living with my parents in Dansbury, but we're in the midst of migrating now. Soon, we'll be residing in Averna," Ethan replied. "Shipping? What is the name of your company?" "Cyrus International Shipping Limited. Our headquarters is in Dansbury and the executive rights are fully in my hands," Ethan answered. "Cyrus?" Mills repeated, turning to look at Ethan in shock. He couldn't believe that the man sitting in front of him was the young master of the world's leading shipping giant. At the sight of how pumped up Mills seemed, Heidi couldn't help but ask, "Mills, have you heard of Ethan's company before?" Next to them, Josephine smirked. Dad's reaction is over the top. "Of course I've heard of it before. The world's top shipping company is called Cyrus." "Ethan, could this be your company?" "Yes, that's my family business," Ethan admitted with a nod and a chuckle. Heidi almost blacked out at his answer. "What? My daughter's boyfriend is one of the world's richest men, eh?" Initially, she thought that Ethan was just a rich young master from abroad, but his status made her jump out of her skin. "Mom, Dad, it's getting late. Shouldn't we get ready and head to Grandpa's?" "Joey, I have some gifts to bring over. Come help me out." After saying that, Heidi gave Josephine a look and beckoned her to come with her. Following her upstairs, Josephine trotted into her room, and the moment the door shut, Heidi rushed to her and asked, "Joey, tell me the truth, are you guys really dating each other?" "Yes, we are," Josephine admitted, nodding. "Honestly, I wish that you can marry a good and rich man, but the difference between our family and Ethan's is too great." "Are you worried, Mom?" Seeing the look on Heidi's face, Josephine was a little afraid that her mother was against their relationship. "I can't help but worry because our family is not in the same class as him. The most blissful marriage is one between two families of similar backgrounds. With such a great difference, I'm afraid that you'll turn into their servant if you marry him," Heidi explained, expressing her concerns to her daughter. "The Quarles family is too high in the hierarchy, and there are only a handful of families within the country who are comparable to them. First of all, I hope you won't marry far away, and secondly, I don't want you to marry into a family of higher status. I just want you to marry a man with a stable income and live your life peacefully," she said and sighed. Looking into her mother's worried eyes, Josephine didn't know how she could comfort her. "In the end," she said with certainty, "but I like him, and I'm in love with him." Even Heidi was aware that no woman would be able to resist a man with Ethan's looks and status. "I know and I feel you. How far are you guys into the relationship now?" Heidi asked in a serious tone, studying her daughter. Blushing, Josephine answered, "Well, we just started dating." Heidi knew that she shouldn't question more. Given society nowadays, it didn't matter which stage of the relationship they were in. Josephine was at an age where she should have experienced it all. "All right. Let's see how the relationship goes, then. I'm not against it and will treat him normally." In the end, Heidi decided not to place any pressure on Josephine. Truth was, she liked Ethan very much. Meanwhile, Ethan was having tea and chatting with Mills downstairs. It also came as a surprise to Mills that Josephine had started dating a man with such an impressive background after not seeing her for a week. After observing Ethan's mannerisms for a while, he concluded that Ethan was the best of the best and the elite amongst the elites. The young man's morals, values, and plan for his life were all very practical and clear. At the same time, Mills also found out about Ethan's feelings for Josephine. To his pleasant surprise, not only was Ethan ready to reside in Averna, he had already bought a stake in the broadcasting company where Josephine is working and a villa in the surrounding area. He did all these because of his daughter. "Oh, would you look at the time? It's almost 6 p.m. and we're still at home. Come on, Ethan. Let's have dinner at Joey's grandfather's place," Heidi said warmly. "Mom, I'll be taking a car with Ethan." After Mills drove out of his property, he saw a sports car parked in front of their house. From one look at the color, he knew that the car was meant for a lady and wondered whether it was Ethan's gift to Josephine. Seeing this, Mills hoped that Josephine would look at her relationship with Ethan with a clear head despite the material gifts, and not get caught up with monetary gratification. Emotional satisfaction was also equally important. On the way to Peter's place, Mills filled Heidi in on his conversation with Ethan. "He did so much for Joey in such a short period of time, huh?" She thought in surprise and couldn't help but recall the Presgrave wedding the last time. How exactly did they get to know each other and be so deeply in love in such a short time? "Why is Ethan so attracted to Joey?" Heidi asked, turning to Mills. "Our daughter has a rather impressive and admirable strength, which is the energy she carries with her. A determined, persistent energy just like me when I was young." All right. You can just compliment your daughter without taking one for yourself as well," Heidi complained jokingly. Still, the couple was in high spirits when Josephine introduced her boyfriend to them. In Ethan's car, it was quiet because Josephine didn't say anything. Ethan's deep-set eyes saw through everything, as though by magic. "Did my background cause pressure on your family?" he asked. "Yeah, you did give them quite a shock, because my parents don't have any friends from a prestigious background such as yours," Josephine muttered with a laugh. Trust me. I'll convince them that we're good together, Ethan murmured as he turned to her with a determined look in his eyes. Her lips curved into a pleasant smile and she nodded. Okay. Peter's place was a house with a small garden, where he now lived out his semi-retired days. It had been some time since Peter last saw Josephine, and he missed his granddaughter very much. As such, he instructed his caretaker to prepare a feast for later tonight. Mill's car drove in first, and Heidi hopped off with the presents in her hands. Dad, we have an extra guest tonight, she announced, breaking the news to Peter first. Who is that? He's Joey's boyfriend. Joey has a boyfriend? Is it Luke? Peter asked. No, he's a young man that Joey picked for herself and comes from an excellent family background. Okay, I'll meet him later. Joey isn't a child anymore and should consider marriage soon. Even Peter carried the hope that he would have the chance to meet his great-grandchild while he was still alive. A couple of minutes later, Ethan and Josephine strolled in from the garden. Their hands were so full of gift boxes that they could barely carry all of them. Ethan, just come as you are. Why did you bring so many presents as well? Heidi grumbled as she took the gifts from him with a smile. Well, it's my first visit to old Mr. Jacobson's place, after all, Ethan replied with a smile. When he saw Peter coming out of the living room, he greeted politely, Nice to meet you, old Mr. Jacobson. Under the light, Peter observed Ethan carefully, and judging from his looks, he reckoned that Ethan was of mixed blood. Is Joey going to marry and move abroad? He wondered. When Josephine caught Peter staring at Ethan, she jumped in and cutely tugged on Peter's arms. Grandpa, let me introduce you both. He's my boyfriend, Ethan Quarles. Hello, Peter said in satisfaction after Josephine's introduction. Ethan felt a hint of pressure from the air of authority that Peter was exuding. Only those who had been in a high position for a long time could cultivate such dominance. Joey, invite Ethan into the house, Peter said. Seeing that it was not yet dinner time, she wanted to take Ethan out on a walk so that Peter couldn't bombard him with questions. Hence, she answered, Grandpa, I'll take him for a walk in the park. We'll be back later for dinner. Okay, go ahead. Peter said adoringly. Grabbing Ethan's hand, Josephine murmured. Come for a walk with me. I spent a lot of time here when I was growing up and am very attached to the surrounding area. Ethan nodded and went with her for a stroll at the park nearby. He knew that she was helping him, so he followed her as she dragged him out. Behind them, Peter sighed. Is Joey going to marry and move abroad? Dad, let her decide on how she's going to live her life, Mills said. But I can't bear to see her go. She's my only granddaughter and I hope that she can stay in the country. At least I can see her more often. Heidi felt the same way and for a while, she wasn't sure whether she should be glad or upset. At the park, there were quite a few residents living nearby taking a walk at the same time. Josephine went over to a swing and sat on it while Ethan pushed her. Delighted, she started swinging and raised her head to look at the sky above. The stars and the moon were just as they were when she was young, but there was another man at her side now. After strolling around the park, she took Ethan back to Peter's place. The food was ready and Peter had even placed a bottle of wine on the table. After pouring a glass for Ethan, Peter said to Josephine, You can drive later. Let Ethan have a drink with us tonight. Deep down, Josephine was worried for Ethan because both Peter and Mills were experienced drinkers. Furthermore, they preferred strong alcohol, and she wondered how much Ethan could take. In the beginning, the Jacobson men drank politely, but it had simply been too long since anyone had a drink with Peter, so he changed the wine to whiskey. While eating, Josephine, just like Mills and Ethan, listened as Peter spoke expertly on all topics. A few minutes later, Ethan's fair face had turned red. That's enough, Grandpa. Don't drink anymore. Seeing that Peter was about to refill Ethan's glass with whiskey, Josephine interjected and held him back. "Just one more. This will be the last. After this, we're not drinking anymore." Peter could really hold his alcohol very well, and Josephine had no choice but to give in. With worry in her eyes, she gazed at Ethan, who assured her, "I'm all right as long as old Mr. Jacobson is in the mood." Hence, the drinks came to an end after one more shot. Then, Peter ate a few mouthfuls of food before heading upstairs to turn in for the night. As Mills wasn't fit to drive anymore, he decided to stay the night with Heidi and asked Josephine to drop Ethan home. The sober Heidi advised Josephine before they left, "Watch out while you're driving, Joey, and don't speed." "I got it, Mom. We're leaving now." "Take care of Grandpa and Dad," Josephine urged. "Mrs. Jacobson, we'll be taking our leave, then," Ethan said politely. "Ethan, have a good sleep after you get home, and drink lots of water." It was Ethan's first visit to the Jacobson and he ended up drinking so much, which made Heidi feel sorry. "Don't worry. I'm all right." Ethan flashed her a smile, and Josephine led him toward the parking lot, holding his arm. On the way back to his hotel, he fell asleep, and she watched him while waiting for a red light to turn green, unable to stop her eyes from staring at him brazenly and intently. Goodness, this man looks so attractive when he's asleep. Back at the parking lot of the hotel, Josephine couldn't hold back and whisked out her cell phone to snap 2 pictures of Ethan in secret. While he was asleep, the light cast shadows on his face and turned his gorgeous features into a tasteful piece of art. Filled with glee, she admired his pictures for a few minutes. "It's not that I have amazing photography skills, but he's simply too gorgeous," she thought. "No matter how I take his pictures, they all end up looking elegant, like he was sculpted by a master." "Ethan, we've reached the hotel. Wake up." Reaching out a hand, she patted his shoulder gently. His glassy eyes fluttered open, then he turned to the woman in the driver's seat. "Will you accompany me tonight?" Seeing him so drunk, Josephine hopped out of the car, picked up her purse from the back seat, and decided to accompany him for the night. Because she was worried. Nevertheless, helping a 6'3" man was a little tiring for her. Fortunately, Ethan wasn't so drunk that he couldn't walk properly. After that, they wobbled into the elevator and headed to his room, where she swiped the room card and opened the door. Then, she led him to the couch and fetched him a glass of water. "Have some water." Taking the glass from her, he then drank the water in sensual gulps. The way his Adam's apple bobbed under the lights sent a jolt of electrifying excitement through Josephine's heart. After Ethan finished the water, he lay on the chaise lounge lazily, and his eyes began roaming all over her. Glassy and mesmerizing, his big and charming eyes, which carried a trace of drunkenness, surveyed her like an animal watching its prey. "Would you like to take a bath?" "I'll run the water for you," she offered. "Are you going to take a bath with me?" he asked. Blood rushed to her cheeks instantly. Did this guy forget that I'm still on my period? Shaking her head, she said, "I can't take a bath, but you should take one." Ethan gave it a thought and extended his hand to her. "Come here." Seeing that he was acting like a disobedient child, Josephine took a seat by his side helplessly, but he caught her unawares and pulled her right to his arms before planting a kiss on her cheek. Her cheek burned from his lips, and she held his face in her hands, returning his kiss. There were multiple instances when she wanted to kiss him the entire time while driving back here, and now that she could do it openly, she wouldn't miss out on the chance anymore. Startled by her kiss, Ethan then smiled in pleasant surprise. One could always feel whether another person liked them, and he could feel that Josephine loved him deeply, which was more precious than any gift in the world. "I'm going to let the water run. After that, you should take a bath, okay?" Then, she pecked his lips rewardingly and turned to head into the bathroom to run a bath for him. Sure enough, the grown man who just received a reward became more obedient and went into the bathroom about 10 minutes after she started to let the water run. He had even taken off his shirt outside, coming in topless and wearing only his black suit pants. The moment Josephine twisted her head around, her heart skipped a beat and she turned back right away. "You can take a bath now." Ethan watched until she walked out before taking off his remaining clothes and soaking himself in the bathtub. Meanwhile, Josephine took a shower in the guest room. Before this, she had left a set of pajamas here, which served as a great convenience whenever she wanted to spend the night here. Tonight was the last day of her period, and the thought of this filled her with anticipation. As she thought about this, her cheeks started to blush in embarrassment. After washing his hair and finishing his bath, Ethan came out of the bathroom with only a towel draped around his waist. Even though he felt at ease with Josephine in the same room, she kept her eyes fixed on his towel, thinking, will that towel fall off unexpectedly and... Blushing brightly, she shrugged the dirty thought out of her mind. "I have a conference tonight. Go to bed first." Walking over, he then kissed her cheek. "If you need me, I'll come and sleep next to you after the meeting." "It's okay." Josephine shook her head, afraid that none of them could catch any sleep if they shared the same bed. "Okay." Ethan lowered himself and planted a kiss on her cheek again, not forgetting another on her lips. Turning limp from his passionate kiss, she pushed him away at the end and mumbled, "Go for your conference now." After the bath, a fresh, pleasant smell lingered on his body. The smell of alcohol was long gone. "You don't have to wake up and drop me off at work tomorrow. I can go to work by myself." "Are you driving?" "Yes." "Okay." Ethan nodded before stroking her head and giving her a kiss. "Good night." That night, Josephine slept soundly and had sweet dreams. She went to the office early the next morning and heard that the results for the exam questions that were submitted last night would be announced in the afternoon. Like everyone else, she, too, hoped that she would score good results in the internal exam. As she was working, Ren approached her and said in excitement, "Joey, have you seen the name list published by the company? Just as expected, you're number 1 on the board." "Huh? The results are out?" Quickly, Josephine opened the internal email inbox and saw that the administrative department had published the names of people who had passed the exam. Her name sat at the top of the list. She breathed a sigh of relief, glad that she hadn't let her efforts go to waste. Afterward, she went to the pantry and was coming out with a cup of freshly brewed tea when a colleague congratulated her. "Joey, I saw you scored first place." "Congratulations." "Thanks." Josephine smiled and nodded in acknowledgement. A second later, she heard Katrina sniggering. Who knows if she really deserves to be number 1 and whether there are any suspicious points given to her or not, eh? After all, her boyfriend is the biggest shareholder in the company. After Katrina's comment, the other colleagues around them turned to look at Josephine with odd looks in their eyes. Just a second ago, they were envious of her, but now, it struck them that they weren't in the position to be envious of her. Furthermore, they assumed that she must have gotten a lot of suspicious points to get to the first spot. Initially, Josephine wanted to snap back at Katrina, but on second thought, she felt that it was unnecessary because she had a clear conscience. "What? Did I say anything wrong? If you have the time to criticize me, you might as well read more books. It must be quite upsetting to be at the bottom, doesn't it? How dare you?" It was true that Katrina was at the bottom of the list this time. After all, how could she have scored good results when she wasn't a person keen on reading? Rather than doubt others, you should build your own knowledge. As you're always relying on connections for protection, you're only capable enough to be an assistant. Josephine snapped and left the room. Very quickly, Katrina became the topic of discussion instead. Compared to Josephine, Katrina was more likely to be the one who got her way through connections. At the end of the day, it wasn't news that Josephine was hardworking. and her performance had always been good since she started working in the company, proven by the Best Employee award that she won every year. Pulling a long face, Katrina returned to her desk. Even she was frustrated at the helplessness she felt when she couldn't do anything to Josephine. However, when she thought further about it, she realized that Josephine couldn't stay arrogant much longer because she might not pass the test with Tori as the gatekeeper. Just then, her elder sister called her on the phone. "Hey, Ivanka. I'm so mad right now and need you to comfort me." "Who made you mad now?" Ivanka asked from the other end angrily. "Who else?" "It's Josephine Jacobson. Recently, she's giving me a hard time because she managed to seduce Mr. Quarles." Hearing that it was Josephine, Ivanka tried to pacify her sister instead. "All right, don't stoop to the same level as her." "Ivanka, you have no idea how much I hate her." "I know, but there's something I have to check with you." "Is Tori going after Mr. Quarles as well?" "What? Who said that?" "I saw the messages in Attica's phone where she secretly asked a favor from him to arrange a meeting with Mr. Quarles." "Really? Does Tori have her eyes on Mr. Quarles as well?" "Looks like things will get interesting from now on," Katrina stated with glee. Beautiful and elegant, Tori was a renowned TV host and rumored to be a wealthy manslayer. As long as she made her move, not a single man could escape from her grasp. Although the situation was hopeless for Katrina, she didn't want Josephine to hit the jackpot either. She would rather have Tori snatching Ethan than watch as he dated Josephine. "Ivanka, do you know if they've been on a date yet?" After some grilling last night, Atticus admitted that he had created an opportunity for them and they probably had a meal together already, Ivanka said. She was annoyed by Tori as well because the latter was really an expert at creating issues. That means Tori and Mr. Quarles already have a thing. Huh. And poor Josephine is still in the dark about this. "Keep an eye on Atticus and don't let any woman close to him," Ivanka said. "Don't worry. I'll be sure to keep a lookout on him and won't let any other woman approach him," Katrina assured, and after making small talk, they ended the call. Overjoyed, Katrina played with her long hair, thinking that all she had to do was wait for Tori to pick on Josephine. "No, I have to let Josephine find out about this before that happens. That will affect her mood and she'll get into a confrontation with Tori during the interview. Let's see how she's going to get past this interview, then." Hence, she decided to take matters into her own hands and find the chance to leak this information to Josephine. During lunch, Josephine went to the staff canteen with Ren, and a nosy female colleague asked Josephine, "Oh, are you still having canteen food with us even though you're already the girlfriend of the biggest shareholder of the company, Josephine?" "Exactly. Aren't you going to have your meals at 5-star restaurants every day or hire a private chef to prepare delicious meals for you?" another colleague joked. "Once you're the lady boss, please treat us kindly, Josephine. After all, we've known each other for such a long time." Seeing the earnest plea in their eyes, Josephine couldn't help but reply with a laugh, "What are you guys thinking about?" "Josephine, if I were you, I would have resigned and become a lady boss long ago." "Exactly. I heard that you even went outdoors for interviews. You should just let someone else do this tiring job. Don't get sunburnt and all." Dumbfounded, Josephine stated after a couple of seconds, "Regardless of who I'm dating, I don't want to lose my goals. I like this job very much because I find it meaningful." 3 pairs of eyes turned wide all of a sudden, and her colleagues thought that she had no idea how lucky she was. After lunch, Josephine made her way to the pantry and wanted to return to her report after making herself a cup of coffee. However, Katrina made use of this opportunity and dragged another colleague who was usually close to her to hide on the other side of the pillar. "Do you know what my sister told me?" she began, raising her voice a little. "Not a clue." "What did she tell you?" Miss Alford secretly went on a date with Mr. Quarles, Katrina said, shifting her gaze toward Josephine, who was behind the pillar. Right when Josephine wanted to pick up her coffee, she heard what Katrina said and her hand trembled. The hot liquid splashed and scalded her a little, but she bore with it because she wanted to hear what Katrina would say next. Really? Miss Alford has made her move, huh? Mr. Quarles is so charming that even Miss Alford has her eyes on him. I guess Josephine still doesn't know about this, does she? There's no way Mr. Quarles will tell her about this. They went on a date a few days ago. He would have told Josephine a long time ago if he really wanted to. Clearly, he's a very open-minded person. In addition, Miss Alford is a stunner and has a great figure. Mr. Quarles has surely taken a fancy to her, Katrina exclaimed. On purpose, for Josephine's benefit. You have a point. All of Miss Alford's ex-boyfriends are wealthy men, so she must be interested in Mr. Quarles. I heard that they ate a meal in a private room and were together inside for 2 hours. Who knows what they were doing inside? But I don't think they went all the way. Men usually like to take advantage of a situation, don't they? Just a little physical contact with the hands is a must. Furthermore, who can be sure that they didn't go to a hotel that night? Katrina sounded so convincing that she could have almost provided evidence that Tori and Ethan had slept together. In the meantime, Josephine leaned against the pillar, looking pale after listening to everything that Katrina said. Is Katrina telling the truth? Did Ethan and Tori go on a secret date and even stay in the private room for 2 hours? She said this happened just a few days ago, but which day was it? With all these unanswered questions in her head, she felt suffocated and breathless. Despite that, Katrina was not quite finished yet as she added, whatever it is, I heard this from my sister, and she heard it from my brother-in-law. Do you think he'll lie about this? If it came from Mr. Kowalski personally, then it must be true. Josephine is still in the dark about this, right? We'll keep it from her and let her be in the dark because she deserves this. Katrina said, dragging her colleague away. Let's go. We'll just wait for the day when Josephine gets dumped. Before stepping out of the pantry, a vicious and victorious sneer spread across her face. When Wren came in to make a cup of tea, she saw Josephine paralyzed and in a daze. She didn't even raise her head when she walked in. What's on your mind, Joey? Isn't your coffee ready? Only then did Josephine jerk her head around. She hung her head and kept blinking because tears had started welling up in her eyes without her realizing it. Hurriedly, she spun around to check on her coffee, avoiding Wren's gaze at the same time. Plastering a stiff smile, she said, I'm returning to my desk to work. Then, she left with the coffee in her hands, but her mind was filled with the things that Katrina had just said. In the company of all the scandals that Josephine had heard about, Tori was the name that was mentioned the most. It was rumored that there was a charm about her, and no man could escape from her palms once they got close to her. Almost every man that she was romantically involved with was wealthy, and she had a way to a man's heart. Now, said woman just had a meal with Ethan in a private room where there were only the two of them. Back at her desk, Josephine held her head in her hands, and it felt as though a drill was drilling through her head. The muscles on her chest contracted and her mind went blank. In her current condition, work was the last thing on her mind. She wanted to ask Ethan, but considering that they had just started dating and he was the biggest shareholder of the company, it didn't seem overboard of him to buy his employee a meal. She would appear petty and jealous, and maybe this would upset him. On the other hand, should she pretend that nothing happened? But Josephine wasn't such an open-minded person. As a woman, she knew how attractive Ethan was and how women would not hesitate to throw themselves at him if they spent time with him. If Tori makes the first move and throws herself at him, will he shove her aside? What if he likes a passionate woman like Tori? Josephine's head was about to split apart. Right at this moment, Wren approached her and said Josephine. "What are you still doing here? Aren't you supposed to attend the meeting?" "What meeting?" Josephine asked, confused. "Oh, that's right. I forgot to mention it to you. Earlier when you were away from your desk, Mr. Kowalski called personally, asking you to go upstairs for a meeting. Hurry now and don't be late," Ren said apologetically. Checking the time, Josephine saw that it was 2:35 p.m. and asked, "What time does it start?" 2:30 p.m., so you're already late. Go now," Ren urged. Picking up a notebook and a pen she would need for the meeting, she then dashed for the elevators and sighed heavily after she stepped into one. "Should I verify this thing with Ethan?" she asked herself. Although she believed in him, she couldn't stop her imagination from running wild when there was no evidence to prove otherwise. When she reached the doors to conference room 3, she knocked and slipped in, only to find out that everyone seated inside was the higher management and important figures of the company, including Tori. Josephine's heart skipped a beat. "Why am I asked to join this meeting? Oh, you're late. Does every reporter take meetings so lightly?" Tori commented sarcastically. Josephine quickly found an empty seat and sat down. Then, she apologized to everybody in the room. "I'm sorry. I misremembered the time. If you're late, you're late. Why bother giving excuses?" Tori cast a disdainful sideways glance at Josephine while holding a cup of coffee to her lips. The sharp response gave Josephine the strong feeling that Tori was deliberately being difficult toward her. Moreover, the intense dislike did not come from their work relationship. In that case, the reason could only be her relationship with Ethan. "Don't worry about it. Let's just continue our meeting." "Josephine, it's okay. It's my fault that you were only informed about the meeting at the last minute." Atticus did not dare to criticize Josephine for her late arrival. To be honest, there was no need for Josephine to attend this meeting. The semi-annual wrap-up meeting mainly only involved those in the upper levels of management, which was above her current position in the company. Atticus simply believed that she would eventually become one of the future key talents in the company, so it would be beneficial for her to attend and learn from such an important meeting. "Thank you, Mr. Kowalski." Josephine nodded gratefully. Afterward, the manager who had been in the middle of making his report resumed his presentation. Meanwhile, Josephine felt a sharp gaze studying her the entire time. The gaze belonged to Tori. Tori usually had an arrogant and standoffish demeanor in the office. As a result, she rarely interacted with the other employees in the company. While she once accepted Josephine's on-site interview during a news broadcast, she generally did not have much contact with her colleagues in private. However, today was an exception. She was uncharacteristically curious about Josephine. That was because she needed a thorough understanding of her rival so that she could snatch Ethan away from the young woman's clutches. Although Ethan had previously rejected her invitation for a meal together, Tori remained very enthusiastic about her chances of a relationship with him. There was no way she could ever give up on him. Ever since her first glimpse of him, she had forgotten all about her past flings. The only good thing about all the wealthy men she dated in the past was their money. Aside from that single aspect, they had either been older than middle-aged or short and fat. None of them had ever been in the same league as Ethan Quarles, who was not only athletic and handsome but also filthy rich. Tori heard from Atticus that Ethan was the biggest shareholder in the company. For Ethan, $725 million was nothing more than pocket change. That level of wealth was something none of the other men she had dated in the past could ever hope to achieve. Therefore, she decided that Ethan would be the man to end her status as a single and unmarried woman. At this moment, Tori wrote something on a piece of paper and pushed the paper toward Josephine. It just so happened that they were sitting beside each other at the meeting table. Startled, Josephine picked up the paper, only to see a single line written on the paper. "I heard that you and Ethan are in a relationship, is that true?" She answered the question directly. "That's right. Do you have any objections, Miss Alford?" Her response came out louder than she expected, causing the manager who was presenting his report at the time to glance at her. Tori's expression turned ugly. How dare Josephine show such disrespect to me? More importantly, was she boasting directly to my face? Her expression hardened and turned cold at the thought. Grabbing her notebook from the table, she stopped conversing with Josephine but couldn't help giving a soft and disdainful snort in response. That soft exhalation of air seemed to convey the sense that Josephine was nothing more than a minor annoyance. Josephine could not focus on the meeting and failed to absorb a single word throughout. As a result, her notebook remained blank when the meeting eventually ended. Everybody was standing up and leaving the meeting room, when Tori suddenly smiled and called out to Josephine. "Josephine, why don't we stay back and have a little chat?" Josephine hesitated and returned to her seat. Then, she gazed at Tori directly. "What do you want to talk about, Miss Alford? Are you aware that I am one of the interviewers?" Tori spun her chair to face Josephine with a gleeful look in her eyes. "I am," Josephine replied. "Do you want me to let you pass the interview?" Tori questioned further, acting as though she had the final say over Josephine's promotion. Josephine raised her eyebrows at those words. "Are you trying to make things difficult for me, Miss Alford?" "Not really. You might have scored the highest on the test, but that does not mean you will pass the interview. I will judge you fairly during the interview. Oh, by the way, I've already met Mr. Quarles. We had a meal together the other day. Didn't he tell you about our meeting?" Tori suddenly brought up the topic but deliberately made her words sound as though she had finished the meal with Ethan. Josephine's breath caught in her throat. It would seem that what Katrina mentioned previously was true. They had gone out for a meal together after all. "You are his employee. It's normal for you to have a meal together. Not to mention, you are the main force behind the TV station. It's only right for him to get to know you better." Although there was a bitter feeling in her heart, Josephine refused to reveal her defeated emotions on the surface. She refused to lose the fight and be humiliated too. Tori was taken aback for a moment before her scarlet lips curved into a smile. "Don't you feel jealous? Most people have a regular social life. Besides, isn't it normal to have dinner with a female colleague?" Josephine replied naturally. "I am also having dinner tonight with a male client whom I'm planning to interview soon." Tori wanted to upset Josephine by mentioning the meal she had with Ethan the other day, so she was surprised by Josephine's calm reaction to the news. Nevertheless, she couldn't help adding with a cryptic smile, "Sometimes, it means more than just a simple meal when a man invites a woman out for dinner. As far as I know, you were the one who took the initiative to invite him out for dinner, Miss Alford." Josephine rebutted Tori's statement. Tori's expression turned ugly. Biting her scarlet lip in frustration, she eventually snapped angrily, "In any case, you better show me your best efforts if you want to receive my approval. Otherwise, you will never pass the interview." After saying that, Tori threw open the door and left the meeting room in a huff. Josephine breathed a small sigh of relief at Tori's departure. Then, she mulled over the time she spent with Ethan over the past few days. Just when did Ethan have a meal with Tori? When Josephine returned to the office, Katrina was chatting with another colleague at her table. She couldn't help sneaking a glance and studying Josephine's expression to see how Josephine was feeling at the moment. Unexpectedly, Josephine happened to meet her gaze when she glanced over. Katrina immediately looked away and acted as though she had not noticed Josephine's arrival. Josephine was a quick-witted woman. Holding a cup of tea in her hand, she suddenly wondered about the incident earlier. Was it really a coincidence that Katrina just happened to be gossiping with the others about that incident in the pantry? Was it also a coincidence that she just so happened to speak in such a loud voice right beside me? Even if Tori and Ethan had dinner together, Katrina's description made the whole incident sound suspiciously ambiguous. It might be that the meal between Tori and Ethan was completely platonic. Josephine exhaled deeply and made her decision. I'll just be frank and ask Ethan about the incident tonight. It'll be better than dwelling on these nonsensical thoughts in my head and excessively depleting my emotional reserves as a result. Since she was young, Josephine had never been the type to conceal her thoughts. If there was something she did not understand or something was bothering her, she would resolve the issue on the day itself so that she did not exhaust herself with useless worries. She abruptly recalled the statement Tori made earlier. It was evident that the other woman was planning to make things difficult for her. When it was time to get off work, Josephine wrapped up her tasks at hand and took the initiative to contact Ethan. Hello. I'm on the way to pick you up. Let's check out the house later. Ethan's voice rang out from the other end of the line. He had planned to pick Josephine up directly from the office because it was still pretty early. She chuckled softly. Sure. Drive carefully. She ended the call with a warm and fuzzy feeling in the pit of her stomach, reveling in the knowledge that they were going to view their future home together in a short while. 15 minutes later, Josephine suddenly received an urgent case that required an immediate response. While she was focused on writing her report, she felt somebody approaching her from behind and leaning over her shoulder to look at the report she was writing. She turned to look behind her, only to be shocked by the sight that greeted her. Ethan had come up to her office. Her colleagues who had yet to finish their work were glancing over in envy. Mr. Quarles is so handsome. He is also so kind to Josephine. He practically picks her up and drops her off at work every single day. Sorry. Please give me 5 minutes to finish up the report, Josephine told Ethan. No worries. Take your time with the report. Ethan pulled out a chair and sat down. Glancing at the cup of tea beside her, he casually reached out and took a sip from her cup. Katrina had just clocked out of work and entered the elevator to leave the office when she heard an excited exclamation from the colleagues around her. Oh, my God! Mr. Quarles is at the reporter's office. He is so handsome. Excuse me. I need to get out. Katrina immediately shoved her colleagues aside and hurried out of the elevator, reluctant to leave the office immediately. She ran back and soon arrived at the reporter's office. Sure enough, a casually dressed Ethan was sitting at Josephine's table. Just the sight of his back was enough to make Katrina's heart race. Oh, my God. This man is way too attractive. Any woman would surely fall in love with him. When Josephine was putting away her report, she inadvertently caught sight of Katrina from the corner of her eye. Katrina seemed to be standing there just so that she could admire Ethan. A sudden idea popped into Josephine's head. She immediately stood up and told Ethan, I'll be back after handing in the documents.
Thank you for listening. If you have enjoyed this story, please like and share so others can see it too. Also hit the subscription button and notification bell so you can be notified on our next release. Thank you for your support. God bless you.